Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, one and all. Thanks for joining us in this episode of SRE Practitioner Series. I'm your host, Suresh GP, and we are at episode number 22 of the podcast. So I have today with me Bharat Joshi, who is the co-founder and chief product officer with ViewNet Systems. With over 25 years of experience in software architecture, his expertise lies in building highly scalable, enterprise-grade, secure software infrastructures and always up digital applications. So under his leadership, ViewNet has developed a highly flexible, scalable, intelligent business journey observability platform called View Smart Maps. And what I like about that is because of its real-time experience around IT ops, biz ops, SRE teams, they are now looking at monitoring more than 20 billion transactions a month. So that's a large number, right? And I thought that would be a good opportunity for us to hear from Bharat on this whole journey on SRE and the observability space. But so thanks, Bharat, for joining us and taking some time to share your perspectives in the industry around SRE and observability.
Thank you so much, Suresh. Pleasure to be here. Really excited about our discussion in observability, SRE, and what exactly we are doing in this space.
Awesome. So to get the context, a lot of times when we interview site reliability engineers, they seem to have a constant struggle, right? They need to look at predictability. They moved from reactive, which was your incident management. They went to proactive, like event monitoring, some level of correlation, and they're looking at the predictiveness. But the problem is underlying, there are so many issues that are still very difficult to unearth. So from your perspective, as you look at site reliability engineers and a lot also heard about the observability talk on the podcast, but give us a rundown on what are the common challenges today for site reliability engineers? Where are they struggling and where do you think there is an opportunity for us as practitioners to help?
Right, Suresh. So let's start a while back, right? SRE is the word coined by Google, mainly because they very quickly realized that their application, which was mainly the google.com search engine, right, was
Right.
becoming very large, very complex, very distributed, right? And they really wanted to sort of bringing engineering mindset into making sure that their application is always available, right? That's where the SRE term was coined, right? They wanted to basically say that reliability is your feature. This is something which, when I was having a word with one of the lead SRE, Safir, he started talking about that. Actually speaking, reliability should be a feature of your application
Right.
going forward, right? And that's how this whole SRE thing came into picture, right? But if you go a little into the past, right, that if you look at how application architecture has evolved,
Right.
how application deployment has been evolving, right, from 3 tier, 2 tier to SOA to microservices and serverless now, to being a single on-premise environment to a multi-cloud, hybrid cloud sort of environment,
Hmm.
right? So the kind of complexity application architecture evolution has brought in, and the kind of complexity the distributed nature of application deployment has brought in
Right.
is just very, very huge, right?
Correct.
And so SREs who basically are trying to build in reliability into these applications, right, are having a very, very tough time,
Correct.
because earlier they were having only one site to work on, but now they are basically looking at multiple different things which basically are coming together to make that application work,
Correct.
right? So SREs are today worried about how my applications are reliable
Right.
in terms of not only in terms of whether it is available or not, but the bigger thing which is coming in more from the customer experience perspective.
Correct.
Just an application being available is not enough in today's environment,
Sure.
right? Most of the enterprises, large or medium, are digitally transforming themselves, where they are moving away from their usual way of doing business to more doing serving their customers using digital channels, right?
Right.
And at that time, just making this application 24/7 available is not enough. every time your customer or user interacting with your application, you have to make sure that they get the best user experience,
Sure.
which means every time their request should succeed, every time their request should be responded within whatever smallest amount of time possible, right?
Right.
That's what is keeping these SREs awake, that even though application might be available, are we really providing the best user experience to our end customer, end users or not?
Absolutely. I
That
think that's spot on. So what happens is in this digital ecosystem, as you talked about, a lot of customer experience issues. Does it mean that your existing infra monitoring tools and application monitoring tools are not sufficient enough? Are they falling short? Or and this is basically, I know a lot of companies that I coach, consult on SRE, they have a plethora of tools, right? There is no dearth of tools, right? It could be anywhere from open source to proprietary vendor. I have nothing, no aversion for any products per se, but there is a whole lot of stack. And I asked them, okay, that's great. You invested a lot of money. Am I getting value? And there's a pin drop silence. I mean, that itself says there's a lot of investment being done on tools traditionally on monitoring, infrastructure, application, client side, synthetic monitoring, all of those stuff, but it's still not giving us results. So what is your take on that particular game?
right. So if you look at, right, as we were discussing, that the whole application development and deployment has been evolving, right? But what has happened is our tools have not evolved as fast as these other things have evolved, right? We
Sure.
are still using some sort of silo view of our performance and monitoring of our application infrastructure,
Right.
which is something I believe going forward will not work. And the kind of expectation our customers and users have with our applications, that kind of expectations cannot be met with the kind of tools we have been using,
Sure.
right? To give you a view, like you rightly said, right, that almost every enterprise today have 10 to 50 to 20 tools to manage, more maintain and monitor different infrastructure components. For example, there will be a NPM which will monitor only network. There will be a server monitoring which will only monitor servers. There will be an application performance monitoring which will monitor only application. And there are then database monitoring, storage monitoring, middleware monitoring, and so on. Right now, while people enterprises today do have these tools, but all these are very silo in nature. These
Correct.
tools sometimes from varied OEM vendors do not talk to each other, do not share this critical information among themselves, right?
Right.
This is one thing which is completely missing, where you do not have, enterprises do not have a complete unified view into how their application infrastructure is performing. This is
Correct.
one big challenge. Second big challenge, which I believe is becoming very, very critical for now, is bringing in the business context into your monitoring.
Correct.
So far, SREs or anybody, IT or BizOps guys are generally looking at machinic data.
Correct.
What I mean by machinic data is how my infrastructure is working, looking at metrics alone, right? Which is not going to be enough, because you really need to go deeper into your application infrastructure and figure out whether a given challenge is actually impacting my business or not, and then bubble them up and make sure those challenges, issues which are impacting your business are taken care of first,
Absolutely.
right? And that information can be brought in only if you put business context on top of all this machinic data.
Correct.
To give you a very simple example, if you go with any of these traditional monitoring tools, right, they generally give, they're quite horizontal in nature, independent of what vertical or what business application you are monitoring, they will end up giving you exactly same view, right? The problem with that is it does not look at my business journeys, my customer, how they are interacting with my application, what is most critical to my customers, and so on. It is just giving you this
Sure.
application or this infrastructure is performing in whichever way.
Correct. So which means that
Compare, yeah,
it tells that there is a gap in terms of the performance part of it, right? And you're right, because sometimes, Bharat, the context is very difficult to understand, right? Because a context for a ViewNet might be very different from a context of top solutions or X and Y and Z. So where does that business context, who is going to feed that business context? And you talked about a touch. Let's do a little touch about the customer journey and business journey, because I think that's a bigger journey, bigger discussion itself. But I want to start there.
right. So to just give a quick view, right? You look at any of these banking applications today you interact with, right? What you do, you basically log in. You might do a balance inquiry to check your account or balance in your account. You might actually try to do a fund transfer. It could be using some of the technologies like IMPS or NEFT or RTGS, whatever is in India, right?
Right.
Or maybe other fast payment like UPI, right? You may want to create an FD, you want to withdraw an FD, and so on. So these are individual customer journeys. Now, from an end user experience perspective, I might be okay if I am not able to see some part of my bank account details, but if I have an urgent need to, let's say, do a transfer,
Right.
right? And my business is depending on that. And at that time, those journeys are failing.
Right.
SRE should have a view that this is my criticalist journey, and that journey is failing. And that journey is failing purely because a dependent downstream application was patched yesterday night.
Correct.
While other journeys which does not go through the same path might be working fine.
Sure.
So from application performance perspective, application performance monitoring tool or other tool may say there are maybe 0.01% failures, but there may be 100% failures for that fund transfer journey.
Absolutely.
It will not get bubbled up until you really put the business context on top of this of monitoring data.
Sure. Now, so it brings to that point that does business observability help address the direct linkage between the IT performance metrics and business performance? Because today what is happening is I looked at my threshold, my CPU, my memory, my utilization. They're all looking great, like the watermelon syndrome, right? I'm still bleeding at the bottom. Now, do you see organizations already clearly categorizing the business metrics? For example, if I'm doing Amazon, all I care about is the number of orders I booked, right? If I'm trying to talk about a telecom company, I'm trying to look at my subscribers who have been enrolled, right? What you do in the back end is none of my problem as a business, right? So is there a awareness right now with service providers, customers to understand that they are now normalizing on business metric rather than IT metrics?
Yeah, actually, there is a huge push coming in from top management. In fact, board also have started talking about observability
Hmm.
because at the end, right, if your end users are not happy with whatever their application they are using, right, they are actually going to go to social media very very
Correct.
soon, very very
Correct.
quick, right?
Correct.
Everybody's about worried about their enterprise brand if their applications are not being delivered correctly to their end customers, right?
Right.
So because of that, there is a huge push. People are saying I am not interested in how my infrastructure or how my application is performing. At the end, is my end user experiences better than what it was earlier? Are we improving it day on day? How my business transactions, it could be fund transfer transaction, it could be balance inquiry transaction, it could be any other transactions, right? Those transactions, how they are performing. People are not looking at this CPU and memory metric sort of thing. People are looking at how many failures are happening at the transaction level.
Right.
Are these transaction failures something which I should have taken care?
Hmm.
Because if you look at transaction failures are two type usually. One is the business decline, which is something which has nothing to do with the infrastructure or the application part of it. Another is technical decline, which is something where an enterprise may have control on. So people are started going deeper into it. Can we make sure that our technical decline in our applications are as minimal as possible?
Hmm.
And in fact, it has to be zero is where people are trying to go for.
So, does it also mean that we need to get to that level of modernization, right? Because with cloud natives and microservices, so if there is a bank, because we do it a lot of banks, and you've seen that a lot of banks still have legacy in place, right? So the question that everybody asks is, okay, guys, this observability is all great, right? Right? Bharat said we need to make that part. We probably look at View Smart Maps to do it, but we are still legacy systems. We don't have that level of adaptability or microservices kind of an architecture. Will observability still be relevant to us? And if it's relevant, how do we even go in that particular journey?
Right. So if you look at, right, one of the thing which we have understood last few years is that, as you rightly said, there are a lot of legacy applications still running in multiple places,
Correct.
and enterprises rightly right in their way that okay, we have invested so much, and bringing it something new which will work is also a difficult choice to make, right?
Correct.
So you definitely need to have understanding of how these application legacy applications are performing,
Correct.
and to be able to do that, one of the thing what we realize is the best way to get all this business context information is through logs.
Hmm.
What we have realized is logs are being used as the ultimate source of truth. In fact,
Right.
if you go towards compliance, if you go towards debugging, diagnostics, everybody finally goes back to the logs, right?
Correct.
And we realize that logs have enough wealth of information,
Hmm.
both from business context perspective, transaction perspective, as well as compliance perspective,
Correct.
right? And that's what we do. I mean, we get all these business context which we are talking about from logs, and then provide that end-to-end unified view where you be able to get all these information in one go.
So
The traditional tools are falling short because they basically have been more figuring out how do we get inside the application, and they really do not have that this type of context available.
right. So you made a very important point. Typically, when we talk about melt of metrics, events, logs, and traces, though
Right.
we start with log, it's very interesting that you mentioned that has got a wealth of information. So sometimes I struggle myself looking at the logs because one, there's a whole lot of data that I have to truncate. I need to do debugging, the part of it. So is there a kind of method to madness on a log? Can a human being comprehend it, or do you need anything on top of it to extract the information to do it, because so much is transactions happening parallelly from all different corners? So how do you kind of a little deeper onto that log mechanism, how do you extract that information to be more meaningful?
Right. So at least at ViewRate, we have developed certain in-house methods to basically understanding the logs, parsing or processing or picking the interesting information out of this.
Right.
Because that is something which is very, very critical for us to really get that business context we were talking about, right? But we have also started using some part of ML, which basically is able to classify X number of logs which are coming in, and then say that these are similar in nature, and then this is how you basically go ahead. These are the interesting information available, and this is how you go ahead and pick those information out,
Hmm.
right? Having said that, this is definitely a challenge, right? And this has been a challenge for a number of years. But now with ML, Gen AI, and so on, looks like there will be some sort of solutions available. Some part of it, Vuret is already doing for last couple of years.
Right. So I think this is great. Now, the part of unified visibility. So we all talk about the single source of truth. I mean, we still struggle to find out which is going to be the single source of truth because everybody wants to chime in with telemetry and other data. We don't want to lose anything. There's no dearth of data, right? I mean, it's just overwhelming. We are talking about trillion records and stuff like that. So in terms of unified visibility, right? When we talk about metrics, logs, traces, how do you create that thing when compared to a traditional siloed approach? What should be our go forward direction when someone is trying to embark on this observability journey? Where do they kind of start with? They all want to get to that state of nirvana, right? But their state is still very haphazard in terms of the way that they do it. So how do they streamline a prerequisite, or even there is a prerequisite before we go into that observability journey?
Right. So there are a couple of things, Suresh, which we have been advising our customers as well as people who are willing to listen to us, right? See, what happens is that people have already invested a lot, right?
Correct.
They have already invested in tools. They, like we discussed, right? They're already using 10 to 15 different tools and so on, right? One of the thing what we generally tell our customers, figure out that how you can bring all these information, whatever these tools are gathering, into a single place first, right?
Correct.
You may not want to replace everything day one. You may want to augment it with a tool like ViewNet, right? Which basically is able to do work on like sort of a full stack observability where we are able to collect data from starting from the network layer to server layer to app to database and storage and so on. And you basically start correlating this data, right, which is coming in from different places. So this would be the step one. There are certain times where people feel that observability is basically tools or stack is available in some open source way, and they generally have this build and buy sort of debates, right? While to start with, we also believe that for a very small sort of enterprise, it is good to build some of these things internally, right? Because then you basically own that stack, right? But as soon as you start growing or the scale start becoming bigger,
Right.
that's where the challenge start coming in,
Hmm.
right? The second thing with build and buy, build versus buy problem, what we have seen is bringing in the required business context.
Correct.
While people know their applications and stuff, right? But the identifying the right metrics, right fields within your logs and so on is still some task, right?
Hmm.
So at the time, giving it to some other thing for buy decisions, right, would make more sense.
Hmm.
For larger enterprises, we have seen it becomes counterproductive. The build decision become counterproductive because what we have seen is people try to build the stack themselves, which they are able to do, but then they what they really miss is the industry best practices, right?
Correct.
Because they are building it within them. How other enterprises have really created an observability stack and how they are using it, that sort of best practices and other information doesn't come in. Second biggest challenge we have been told by multiple customers now is that the person who had built the stack, right, once he moves out, then it becomes very difficult for other people to come in and start managing and maintaining that,
Correct.
because usually there are no documentation available, how and where data is coming in, what sort of processing is happening, because it does require a lot of effort to build such a stack in first place,
Correct. Correct. Correct.
right? Third thing which people generally miss is the cost to maintain and keep improving this, because your application is changing, your infrastructure is changing. You would be moving from a monolithic to microservices architecture, and then again, a lot of investment would be required, and so on. So these
Right.
are some of the things which people need to keep in mind when they are really looking at moving towards observability side.
Right. So, in terms of business observability, right, how does business observability help organization improve transaction success rate and system reliability? Because that's the proof is in the pudding, right? And
Right.
whatever you do, whatever tools that you talk about, let's get into the action. So, how does that, what kind of results can you see when it comes to that focus of business observability?
Right. So, if you remember, right, we started with somewhere that we wanted to make sure that customer experience and user experience is becoming paramount now, right?
Correct.
And usually, customer experience goes bad if their requests are failing or
Correct.
if their requests are taking more time.
Correct.
One of the thing, so this is one part of it, right? Second part we discuss is that the whole application architecture, application deployment infrastructure is becoming very complex and
Correct.
almost like moving thing, right? Now SREs have to have a very deep view into this whole application, whatever infrastructure it is using,
Correct.
right? This is to make sure that their end user experience is good.
Correct.
Now, in this case, the business observability part actually gives you the transaction which is coming in for that journey, along with the failures which are happening in that journey,
Right.
along with the response time which is being seen for individual request, right?
Right.
Now, what really happens is with this data in hand,
Right.
SREs will be able to figure out in my whole journey of a given transaction, in my whole infrastructure, which
Hmm.
component, which application is either failing those transactions or figuring out like which place it is taking more time.
Hmm.
And with that information in hand, they will
Right.
be able to figure out what exactly they need to fix. So this is something which we call like a holy grail of IT ops, right? That somehow I be able to figure out the root cause and then go ahead and fix it. And that is this iteration of fixing these root causes, whatever you get,
Sure.
make sure that your overall success rate of your transactions or overall improvement in your customer experience comes out. So that's
Absolutely.
how SREs actually look at doing this.
Perfect. Now, when you do these kind of understanding and helping people, how much of enablement is required to tell the customers what to do and what not to do? Because I see this going to be, people think that I bought a tool, it should solve everything. It's a magic wand to do that. So in those cases, how do you educate the customers to understand the do's and don'ts before we jump into that part? I mean, do you see this as a challenge as well when you talk with customers?
You are spot on, Suresh. Let me tell you that there are cases where people still expect a particular platform coming in and then solving all their problems, right?
Hmm.
And we keep telling customers that, boss, this is an iterative
Correct.
process. This is
Correct.
a approach where you will go from reactive to proactive to predictive.
Correct.
It is not that you are completely reactive today, and suddenly all your problems get solved in 6 months, 3 months,
Correct.
2 months, right?
Correct.
Two things really happens. One is that because we believe logs are having wealth of information and that should be used. And if you look at observability, it basically comes up with these three pillars of logs, metrics, and traces.
Correct.
That's for a reason, right? Because everybody believes that if I want to really get good context, good understanding of what and how my application is working, I have to have a view into the logs, right? So our biggest challenge comes when applications are not writing good enough logs.
Correct.
It doesn't have enough information in terms of what exactly application is doing, and with enough context data. When I say context, what I really mean is, let's say a transaction is failing, right? Is it that it is providing enough information like response code and from where the response came in and why the failure happened and so on?
Correct.
A
Correct.
simple log line with that information actually gives a lot of information to the SREs.
Correct.
You'll be able to figure out, okay, all my requests are failing with response code X.
Correct.
And X really means this part of the code or this
Correct.
part of the connection to a third party servers, right?
Correct.
And then this kind of information, if it is available, it becomes so much easier for SREs or application owners to really figure out what to fix, right?
Right.
So this is sort of information people need,
Right.
and this is what we need to educate to our customers,
Right.
that if your logs do not have some of these important critical information, they should go back and add them,
Correct. So, which
right?
also
And
brings to the point of instrumentation, right? I mean, some level, if we look at the way developers are, people who have done that, they're on a on a race, right? Within this particular sprint, I need to release the feature, so they don't even have time to refactor things. So we are doing fast. So it brings down to the point of instrumentation, one of the most important part of the next time, like the wisdom of production happens. I don't know how this works, and you feed it back to the development team, and then they say, okay, this is probably not pushing it up. Now I will instrument my code so the next time it pushes into the error log. So how much of that instrumentation is now being relooked at it? I mean, you talked about reliability as like a first class citizen, right? But things
right,
are already on, right? I mean, I don't know, you're talking about reliability as a retrospective, right? So when I try to bring in from the left to right, are people still doing that level of instrumentation to get enough amount of details on the logs? Would you think that is important?
yes. So in fact, after talking to a lot of customers, we ourselves came out with some sort of a recommendation on how to write good logs,
Hmm.
right? And we basically have been giving this to all our customers, so that they can actually improve logs for their existing application. And one bigger reason is that they are still coming out with new applications,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
So there, like you rightly said, right, we have started sort of educating our customers and partners and so on, that how to make your a shift left and start thinking about observability day zero, not even day one, day
Right.
zero, right? Think about how are you going to observe or monitor whatever new application you started working on. Am I going to the whole logs should come as a strategy,
Right.
right, into your application development process, so that when it really gets shipped,
Correct.
it is day one observable.
Correct. Correct. Correct.
Same
Absolutely.
thing, same thing we talked about instrumentation. If it is a microservice based architecture, how can I make sure that my trace IDs are available from one service to another service?
Correct.
Can I do distributed tracing? Make sure that whatever context, whatever unique ID I want to pass from one service to another service, it's getting passed,
Correct.
right? So
Correct.
that is where we have started talking about embedded observability, where instead of thinking about observability or something where it is already deployed, you started thinking from about it from J0.
Wonderful. Perfect. I have a couple of questions. One is, as you see the common challenges the organization face from transitioning from traditional APM to business observability, right? We talked about customer journey, we talked about the context. How does ViewNet facilitate this transition, right? Because we've been doing a lot of these aspects for a lot of companies global. I mean, India itself is looking at the UPI transactions, just 20 billion transactions, they just mind-boggling, right? With that said in mind, how are you facilitating for your customers? Because there are me some level in which you would have approached this. That would be a very good insight for all of us.
Right. So, I mean, some part of it we discussed a bit early on, but let me give you a view how ViewNet approaches it, right?
Correct.
we generally do is we basically start with understanding their one specific application. Let's assume it is like a internet banking or mobile banking or a UPI's type of application, right? Then we basically try understanding what exactly they are monitoring today, what sort of visibility they have today, right?
Correct. Correct.
And then we also look at whether it is a monolithic or microservices or SOA based architecture. Usually, we have seen more SOA based architecture so far, where there is a front ending application, then there is a ESB, and then there is a back end application, and so on, right? So, what sort of journeys this business journey of a given application will take? Which paths they will take? Right? What sort of third party applications they are talking about,
Right.
right? Example, UPI application usually have a connection going to NPCI for basically doing their own processing, right?
Right.
So those sort of understanding we take, right? And post that we basically bring in all the metrics, health, performance, availability from underlying infrastructure, which could be server, network, database, web server, app server, middleware, storage, all sort of things, right? And then we look at logs, and then we look at traces.
Right.
So all these information from the application which we are targeting is brought in.
Right.
Post this, the same exercise is done for all the dependent application through which this transaction will go.
Right.
That's how you get a complete end-to-end journey. So that whole journey gets stitched, and that's how you get a complete end-to-end journey of any business journeys of end user for that application.
Right. Absolutely. That's great. Now, the last question that I want to kind of look at it from a perspective of looking ahead, right? Because everybody wants to look at what's the future look like, right? People, process, products, partners. This whole ecosystem is changing with AI, machine learning. There's a lot of exciting things happening around. There's a lot more things about ethics of AI. We talk about deepfakes and stuff like that. So it's kind of a double-edged sword, right? But from your perspective, as you start to venture into meeting a lot more customers and shaping this whole journey. How do you see the evolution of application infra monitoring to business observability, right? Where are you going to see the future? I mean, if I look at back, probably we look at this podcast 3-4 years later, will have things changed dramatically or we will still be continuing to do with some other problems?
No, I think things are going to change. I think are going to change for better,
Right.
right? Couple of things which are happening with ML and Gen AI in mainly from for observability space, right? Something which everybody struggles, right? Is like alert noise, event noise. There are thousands of infrastructure components in any large enterprise network, right? And they are struggling with thousands of alerts, events keep coming to them. How do you find a high fidelity alert or high fidelity event out of this, which
Right.
is actually causing maybe multiple events together,
Right.
right? That's where I believe ML is going to help a lot. In fact, Virat has been doing some work on this event correlation using ML, right? The second thing which I am very excited about, which I believe is something we talked about like a holy grail, is probable root cause, right? Uh, at the end, SREs or IT ops folks or biz ops folks are generally looking at. I understand the problem will happen. You can try avoiding it as much as you can, but problem will still happen.
Correct.
The biggest thing what everybody is looking at, how quickly you identify the problem, that there
Correct.
is a problem happening,
Correct.
then how quickly you identify the root cause, and
Correct.
then how quickly you fix it,
Correct.
right?
Correct.
And that's where I believe ML and Gen AI sort of going to help, very very helpful, because we talked about we are gathering performance health data from a lot of these components, right? Now what we are looking at is feeding it into some sort of ML model,
Right.
right? And then looking at lead indicators like transaction failure, transaction taking more time, and so on, and then figuring out of all these components, they will be having thousands of golden signals, right? Which golden signal of which component could be creating this problem,
Sure.
right?
Sure. Sure.
Bubble them up. So that becomes your probable root cause sort of thing. Now, as soon as the root causes, let's say you identify two root causes for a given problem, the next step immediately is how do I solve it? So we are actually moving from observability to recommendability,
Right.
where we are saying this is the root cause, And 99% of the time, people fix it using these recommendations.
Correct.
And these recommendations are being generated using
Yeah.
Gen AI.
Excellent. I think that's the right way to do it, right? Because we should not be doing task which does not require, it has to be delegated to something like an AI which will do us, and we are taking more meaningful decisions and decisionable insights. And one of my causes, I want to get rid of this whole false alerts part of it, because over a period of time we have been struggling on this particular part so long. Hopefully,
Right.
as we get more observability behavior, that probable causes and recommendability, then we will probably able to know what will go wrong rather than just looking at, oh, hopefully this will all right. So we'll become better in that level of signal to noise ratio in the way that
Right.
it finally gives us actionable results.
Right. Right. The last part which you talked about, which I did not intentionally mention, was the predictive part of it.
Correct. Correct.
I didn't want to go there immediately because there is a lot to learn for us,
Correct.
right? Uh, Doing a single metric prediction is very, very easy today,
Correct.
right? If
Correct.
I want to say that, okay, how much CPU utilization my server will have, maybe tomorrow or day after, that
Right.
is very easy to predict today in today's
Correct.
with whatever machine learning advancements we have seen, right?
Correct.
But that is something which is not very useful.
Correct.
What will be useful, like you said, can you tell me when are things going to fail?
Correct.
When are my customer experience going to degrade so
Correct.
that I can figure out things now, right?
Yeah.
And that will still maybe another 6 months or a year
Correct.
for people to really reach there and start talking about it from that perspective.
Awesome.
But the other thing which basically people have started looking at AI was the capacity planning sort of thing that
Sure.
somewhat we are also doing, where you can say my complete infrastructure today handles 1 million transactions a day.
Correct.
But there is a festival coming or there is a big billion day sort of thing coming, and I would expect maybe 3 million transactions a day.
Correct.
Can I figure out whether my current infrastructure is good enough? If
Correct.
not, what sort of infrastructure I would need?
Sure.
So
Sure.
those sort of analysis is definitely possible today with AI. So that is
Awesome.
another test case or use case which we are looking at.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Bharat. We could talk for hours and other stuff, but kind of being conscious of the time and effort that you put in, it's amazing. I hope our viewers got a great insights about SRE and observability. And I would definitely recommend you to have a look at ViewNet and smart maps that we are talking about. Is there a trial instance that people can try to check out what it is
Yes,
available? Yeah.
it's available on our website.
Awesome.
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time. And I hope to see you all in our next episode of SRE Practitioner Series. Look at all of the things. This is available on the Google Podcast and Spotify. So you can actually look at hearing this part during doing your gym and as well. So hopefully we will be able to change the plight and become the saviors of site left engineers. Thank you so much, Bharat.
Thank you so much, Suresh, for your time. Thank you.
Excellent part of the conversation.